This is a great. All right. This is the month of May, and this is African Liberation Month. I think somebody designated it that way, although there's one important date in it that, but we have taken the whole month now,
All right.
African Liberation Month. But so as not to delay, since we're kind of late, let me first do, the preliminaries, which is, of course, the official UNIA pledge to the flag and the preamble to the UNIA Constitution, which I'll read now. Uh, I have to make sure that I'm not, audio is going on. Okay. All right. Official UNIA pledge to the flag. This is our ninth day of May in this African Liberation Month. Official UNIA pledge to the flag. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the protection, defense, and security of the red, black, and green. I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa and the liberation of her scattered black children. I accept for myself and my descendants the teachings of universal African nationalism, and I promise that our children will be instilled with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people, in order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail until all black people are free and united through one God, one aim, one destiny. And now, for the preamble of the UNIA-ACL Constitution, I always like to remind people that this preamble it's a statement as to what we of the UNIA is all about. It was founded, I should say, it was promulgated in 1920 in New York at the convention. The Madison Square Garden, they had the largest convention and in history. So let's go past that. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League is a social-friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive society, and is founded by persons desiring to the utmost to work for the general uplift of the Negro/Black peoples of the world. And the members pledge themselves to do all in their power to conserve the rights of their noble race and to respect the rights of all mankind, believing always in the brotherhood of man and the fatherhood of God. The motto of the organization is one God, one aim, one destiny. Therefore, let justice be done to all mankind, realizing that if the strong oppresses the weak, confusion and discontent will ever mark the path of man, but with love, faith, and charity towards all, the reign of peace and plenty will be heralded into the world, and the generations of man shall be called blessed. Therein lies what the heartfelt feelings of all of us in the UNIA-ACL is to our duty. All right. Now, of course, we have this this forum, this Freedom Friday of May 9th, and we're saying that this is Africa and African liberation struggles is what we're going to be talking about. Of course, for me, the important word here is liberation, and we have African here. And before we get into discussing Africa and African liberation struggles, I will, for my own edification, I did a little bit of research as to what this word means, this word called liberation, coming out of the word liberty. And what I found in I guess this is the Google, uh, is defined in Google as the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. And the Cambridge definition is the freedom to live as you wish or go where you want. Liberation coming out of that, I suppose, is the struggle to get to the point where you out of being oppressed, out of being uh, suppressed by authority. So, uh, in going into the discussion, I just wanted folks to understand what this word liberty means. And I should maybe ask the question so that we will move forward. Um, uh, with all the struggles we've had throughout history, and especially on the African continent, where African liberation, if we want to talk about it as a African liberation, but for me, African liberation is liberation throughout the world, the diaspora. But we have focused on the African continent because that's out of which that place where we came from before we got around the rest of the world. And we've had that colonial period where Europeans and others have had their feet or their boots on our necks, and there was repression, suppression, slavery, etc. Uh, and I often wonder, uh, after all that history, all those struggles, and if and winning some of those struggles, or almost all the struggles, winning quote unquote independence from colonialism. Uh, can we define what is happening to us today as having been really liberated, so to speak? Are we in a liberated sense as we move around the world? Are we feeling liberated, really? Are our peoples throughout the world uh, considering themselves liberated from the colonial world, the past uh, uh, European and there was a little bit of Asian as well, because we can go to the Arabs, etc. Are we liberated? So it's hard for me to really make a choice as to who I should point to say, coming out of that definition, where do we start here? At what point uh, can we say that we are liberated as a people? Even though we have governments by Africans all over the world, listen, Caribbean, Latin America, the continent. Where are we now, folks? After all the struggles, where are we now? Are we liberated? And I had in mind to ask the good professor David to lead off, since he lead off with what
David is not
that
here.
should mean.
David is not here. David will be late.
Okay, all right, and the other person, um, who Dr. Chen, but then there's one person here
She's not here.
who has been in the struggle for a very long time, and I'll go to him because I know he can send us off, or I should say he can open us up with you know points, defining points, and and I guess raising our consciousness as to what truly is liberation. Uh, Baba Menkh,
Yes, Africans.
yes,
Can you hear me?
yes, we hear you clearly, my brother.
All right. Let me see if I can make this all work how it's supposed to work. There's my face.
Yes,
You know, African Liberation Day came out of the need for African liberation because the oppression of Europeans and Arab imperialism has been dominating Africa and dominating people of color worldwide. And as we used to say, our scattered and suffering people, our people are scattered. People of color are scattered and divided against themselves all over this earth. And so the call for African Freedom Day that came from the OAU was the beginning of this call for an African Liberation Day, an African Freedom Day, 1963. But now, here we are, reminiscing about the call from Marcus Garvey in 1920 for a united Africa. So it took a lot of years in organization and time among our people to actually bring that concept to public form, to come to the discussion of public leadership, to talk about what does African liberation mean and how does that achieve itself? What does it mean to be sovereign? What does it mean to be in control of your own economy, to be in control of your own resources, to have your own product that you represent to the rest of the world with integrity and honor and trade balance, which has become a big conversation today. What is trade balance? So Nkrumah, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was one of the major activists talking about African liberation and the call for an African Liberation Day. But at the same time, it was well acknowledged that that kind of political organization could get you killed in Africa. And the organizations were under political and military control. So it wasn't until 1970 in Guyana, in a grand demonstration of the Pan-African Secretariat, that the call for an African Liberation Day was to be held in the Western Hemisphere. Now, it still took a few more years until the All-African People's Revolutionary Party really brought that to the stage in Washington, D.C. And if I've got this right, I think that was 1976. And Africans came from all over the world to African Liberation Day at Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C. And the call for that African Liberation Day had to define, what does it mean to have African liberation? One of those aspects of having African liberation is that you have to have an organization that's representing the concepts of sovereignty, integrity, and the historical balance of African people worldwide. So that African Liberation Day was celebrated by Africans from all over the world. And I could not ever reveal to you the feeling of being in Malcolm X Park in 1976 with the FBI, CIA sitting on top of all the major buildings with machine guns aimed at us in that park, at Malcolm X Park, with the drummers doing the African drumming, with the dancing going on, with the vendors selling all the way around in the street, with the national radio programs broadcasting African Liberation Day on the radio for 24 hours. But that wasn't enough, because the call for that African Liberation Day was to take African Liberation Day back to Africa, which was the original call of Kwame Nkrumah. That we have to have that kind of celebration on the African continent in order to bring that awareness to people. I can only remember in 1991, I was sailing across the waterway between the airport in Sierra Leone. The airport is across the water from the town of Freetown. So you have to sail across the ferry to come to the actual city of Freetown. So while sailing from the airport to Freetown, the city, I talked to people on the ferry about African Liberation Day. They had never heard of it. They didn't know what I was even talking about. So a lot of the time, while the ECOWAS military was sitting there next to me, looking at me talk about African Liberation Day, that we had the conversation that that is the purpose of African Liberation Day, to inform and to educate our people and to lead a direction in what does it take to form a political party. For those political parties then to seize power in each of the microstates of Africa. Now, we know those states don't actually exist because they were formed as a result of military battles between the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the Germans. They didn't decide on those dividing lines. Those lines that we call microstates today, those lines came about as a result of them fighting between themselves and where they decided to hold a truce. That's where those lines exist on that map, those borders on the map of Africa, because those borders on the map of Africa divide tribal homelands, divides the people against themselves. So our call for African liberation is to bring those boundaries, to make those boundaries useless. To talk about, as Sekou Touré under the PDG of 1947, wherever we have mass organization, we have freedom and liberation for our people, where people can get health care, where people can get education, where people can study together. As Sankara and Cabral studied with Nkrumah and Sekou Touré in their study groups to form the military and political organization that Africa needed to be truly a liberated zone. And the way that a lot of us are applauding today, our brother Abraham Traoré is showing us today what it looks like to have sovereignty, to have control of your own currency, to be able to produce your own vehicles, to be able to export those vehicles and that technology to the rest of Africa. That's when we start to talk about what African liberation really means. To control your own currency, control your economic destiny, and to spread that word throughout Africa and to remove those borders that separate our people. And I'll leave that at that for now.
Yeah. Thank you, my brother. You know, I was, I have to thank you for that. That's a good description of as to what where we should be, and that's just I see that a micro state situation, and you got one person who is doing what is probably everybody else should be doing right now. I think I was on I was watching a show where some questions were being asked about responsibilities of governments when you're a democracy, so to speak. Being a democracy uh, and being authoritarian state, etc. And there's a lot of talk about that on the media on the African continent. There's a lot of discussions as to what authoritarianism means and uh, and what direct democracy means and stuff like that. So anyway, I think it seems like we're in flux. It's like for direction as to where to go. But the young people are looking for results. They're looking for action, and they're seeing it in one place or in one region, and that's I guess the Sahel region. And that's for now. I haven't seen anything that stirred up the youth for a very long time as what is happening in Burkina Faso. And maybe that's where people are now getting the feeling, or young people are getting the feeling that they're being liberated, or there's liberty here. But I'm not so sure. So, but anyway, I was waiting also to see if other my other guests will be coming on, so I can introduce everybody. But first, but let me just keep on going. We have, of course, the President General of the UNIA-ACL RC 2020. Yes, President General. And we have the first Assistant President General. I forgot. Akili. Baba Akili, I'm sorry. And we have the first Assistant President General, Sengo Baye. We have the third Assistant President General, Chief Foday, Ajamo Mansaray. So what we're going to do tonight, they're on because we want the world to actually find out, because a lot of questions have been coming at me regarding where do we stand regarding African liberation. They don't think that we are involved with African, we're just all about Garveyism, and to them, they don't really relate. A lot of people don't relate. They don't understand that Garveyism is about African liberation. It's about freedom for Africa. It's about about managing ourselves. So we want our people in UNIA-ACL RC2020 to project who we are in the world as fighters for African liberation. And as fighters, as soldiers, as the people who can liberate African people wherever they are from a situation that they feel is repressing them. Economic repression, military repression, under whatever label it is. So we're going to get our people, and we just had Brother Menkh explain. Brother Menkh is also he's not in the top layers of the movement of the UNIA-ACL RC2020, but he is a cog in the wheel. And what he has explained to you there comes from his own experience, from his own knowledge. And we have other people here, educators, who can say the same thing. Mama Tendai, she's the Minister of Education in the UNIA-ACL RC2020. We would love to have who else is there? But anyway, whoever we have here now are the people who will speak to you on where the UNIA-ACL RC2020 is regarding liberation, African liberation, Garveyism in African liberation, how they come together, how they mesh, and how do we see the future for African people being liberated economically and even psychologically. Okay, so maybe I should start off with a small comment or statement coming from the President General, if you don't mind, sir, at this point, as to where you are positioning the UNIA-ACL RC2020 in this African liberation.
Hotel family.
Okay.
First, Baba Mosey, I truly appreciate you and appreciate the comments of the other elder brother who spoke. RC2020 stands in lockstep with the concept of African liberation. The initial convention of 1920 spoke to African liberation, spoke to African freedom purposely by electing the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey as the provisional president of the continent of Africa. All other steps coming after was in lockstep with that definition decided by people of African descent from across the world. We of RC 2020 stand in lockstep with that. That first African Day in Malcolm X Park, I stood, I walked, I marched, and I was not a leader of the UNIA. But I believe that African people have a right to control their own destiny. I believe and I know that the lines that are drawn on the continent are not lines that were drawn by African men and women, but drawn by those who chose to try to imprison us, capture us, and control us, and therefore force their own language on us, so that we speak a separate language and a different language across the continent based on who was the principal oppressor. When we speak of African Liberation Day, Africa will be a free and united nation. It is the commitment of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League Rehabilitated Committee of 2020 to fulfill the dream of our ancestors of 1920, which is a unified African nation. Because once we do, and if we ever decide that there is another path to follow, we will be wrong. So once we commit and make it happen, listen, it's not going to be an easy challenge. You have the third assistant president general here on this call. You have the first assistant president general. You have the brother who spoke before me, who has already given the historical analysis of it. So the reality is, it is our time to move the issue forward in conversation in every media that we possibly can. The liberation of Africa is going to be the liberation of people all over the world, because the only reason those who remain in the position that they do is because we have not liberated Africa. Our ancestral lineage touches every continent in the world. We touch every continent. There are no people that exist without our touching them in one fashion or another. Our freedom frees the world. All right,
Thank
my brother.
you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, somebody, I just see a radiance coming from somebody that just popped up, and that tells me that there's going to be a voice giving an opinion here as to how she sees. This is the Minister of Education I'm talking about, Queen Mother Tendai Johnson. She's sitting there. She is the Minister of Education, UNIA-ACL RC2020. Mama Tendai.
Greetings, family. I'm sorry, I have been in and out trying to get this video to come on.
It looks good right now.
Finally, it did, but I missed the conversation. So finally, the latter part, the only thing I would say is the question that you had posed in terms of liberation and sovereignty. In my mind, the whole idea when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we speak of ourselves as being Pan-Africanists. Therefore, the liberation of Africa is synonymous with Pan-Africanism in my mind. There is no difference. So if we're talking about Pan-Africanism, we're talking about liberating our people, liberating the continent, and we're talking about our own self-determination and the sovereignty of the individual nations that make up the whole of the continent of Africa.
Okay, my sister, thank you for that. We'll be getting around, and after we finish with the top echelon of UNIA-ACL RC2020, we will go to some questions. And so right now, let me take um, this to the third Assistant President General, Brother Chief Foday, who is a man around. He's on the continent, and he's been doing a lot of talking. He's organizing youth all over the place. He's I tell you, I have a lot of admiration for the work he does. He seems to be full of energy and is ready as a warrior for the people. And that is freedom of the people. So,
Yes,
brother, you are with the youth, you are on the continent itself. And speak to me about how you feel that the young people on the continent, or people on the continent, even not, they don't have to be young, do they have this feeling that they're totally liberated, they're liberated and they can do what they want, as you know, I mentioned earlier, as the definition for liberty means. Are they feeling free? Let's say.
In one word, no.
Hmm.
There's no way that the African youth feel free. Because we're not free. We're not tripping. You know, a lot of times we feel hopeless. We feel like we don't have the resources or the connections we need to do something. But we're not fools. We know we're not free. You understand? We know that if we're hungry, we're not free. That if we're still paying for substandard education, we're not free. That if we're still waiting for roads and lights and running water, we know that freedom hasn't arrived yet. We're not that, backwards. We're human, just like everyone else on the continent. But at the same time, I just want to say, Abiba Foday, and Abibi Tumi. Abiba Foday is a Twi word. It means African liberation. Abiba Tumi means Black power. And so when that spirit is in the spirit that I want to address the people today, I first want to start by saying that today, we, the African world, have to get into the habit of remembering May 9th, 2013, when the grandson, namesake, heir of Malcolm X, who were coming to celebrate his 100th year birthday on the 19th, that his grandson was assassinated in Mexico City on this day 12 years ago. So I want to say that first to put this whole African liberation question into context, because how can we think that we've been liberated where they can still assassinate our young future leaders before we even know who they are, before they even get to write a book, before they even get to make a speech? Gone. Prison or the grave or drugs or something worse. I view the African liberation as a movement, as the same historical movement that our PG Baba Akili always says, that all of this is one movement. We might have different organizations. We might be divided up into different clans and families, and ethnicities might be divided up a little bit, but it's one movement. And that movement is for the liberation of African people. And that means not only on the continent, but everywhere, every inch of this earth where our people exist, we need to have freedom. And so freedom has to be defined based on us. We can't come utilizing Eurocentric terminology to define our own state of existence or what we're seeking to strive towards. It just can't happen. So to me, African liberation is the historical movement that goes all the way back to ancient Kemet, that goes all the way back to the early incursions on African soil, the early invasions, the early enslavements and colonizations and brutalities. talking about thousands of years ago. We've been locked into this struggle, generation after generation, millennia after millennia, with the same forces who seek to invade, enslave, colonize, and take as much of African resources as they can back to their caves, back to their deserts, wherever they're going. Outside of Africa, their goal is to come here and pillage and take. So this is going on for generations and generations and generations. And to me, when I think of African liberation, we represent this generation of African liberation fighters. Whether you're currently in the elder years or you're a young whippersnapper, we breathe in the same air. We belong to the same generation. So the fact that we've always had different individuals and organizations throughout time helps us understand African liberation as a process, something that we haven't yet reached, but that we have been in hot pursuit of for generations. Some of us have been here before fighting this same struggle, and we're back on the whirlwind. We're back on the spin around. We're here again in the same liberation struggle as we was the last time we manifested in the physical. So that's levels and layers of what we're going through. But African liberation is not only a political concept, it's a historical and a spiritual concept. It's something that we can lean on to extract our value system. We can lean on to extract our sense of morality. We can lean on to restore justice to our own social relationships within our own African families and communities. And so I want to say something as well in terms of what you were saying, Baba Mosi, with the young people. How do they feel? The gentleman who was speaking earlier, he talked about when he was here in Sierra Leone and he was on the ferry leaving Lunge, coming over to Freetown. And he asked people about Pan-Africanism or African liberation there, and they didn't know. I'll say you asked the wrong people. And I'll say that Freetown is the birthplace of practical Pan-Africanism in this world. It is the place where all the elements came to fruition the first time, where we actually came back to the continent and resettled on the continent with our people on the basis of pursuing our liberation. That's why it's called Freetown, right? So this is the birthplace of this whole concept. In fact, Edward Blyden, who's called the father of Pan-Africanism, is buried here. He served as an official here in this city, Freetown. And so I know that there's tides of consciousness, but at the same time, just to give some history and let you know where we're at right now in Sierra Leone in terms of reaching young people and doing exactly what Brother Julius Menkh was saying earlier in terms of building Pan-Africanism at the national level, so we can at least put ourselves on the map in a liberated state. You understand? So pursuing state power, building political parties, building mass organizations, building people's programs. So for myself, I've been here for 12 years. I came here in 2013. I came here with a group of Pan-Africanists. This is why I'm saying what I'm saying. There definitely are Pan-Africanists here. I met Pan-Africanists from here in 2007 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that was on tour to address us and let us know that there's Pan-Africanists in Sierra Leone. So I've known of the Pan-Africanist movement here since 2007 myself, and I've been actively involved. And so there was a group here called Pan-Afro, or Pan-African Union, and they came out of Foday College, which is the first Western university in West Africa, or in Africa, period, in south of the Sahara. It's here in Freetown. And there was a time in 1978 where this country became a one-party state. The party that had the state was called the All People's Congress, the APC, represented by the red color politically, right? They have another party too, just like they got the Democrats and Republicans. It's the same democratic divide and control and conquer and exploit the people system all around the world. It just has a more devastating impact on colonized populations. And so they have another party called the Sierra Leone People's Party, the SLPP. And they always are the two parties that fight, and win the power. Everyone else basically has to suffer under one of those parties, even till today. But back then, the APC, they created a one-party state here. And the one-party state is what literally created the conditions and the circumstances for what we've seen in the 11-year war. It didn't come out of nowhere. It didn't come out of senselessness. It came out of people who realized that their basic democratic right to choose their leaders and participate in the political process had been nullified by a one-party state that disenfranchised half of the population for the sake of a small group. And so that was the conditions that actually led to people protesting here. First, the unions began to protest. They started shutting down the unions. The journalists started reporting it. They started bombing the journalist offices. At the end, it was the students, the young people at the university that used their own political space and created the Pan-African Union of Sierra Leone. And they pushed Pan-Africanism. They was aligned with the APRP, based in Guinea-Conakry. They have a Pan-Africanist model that is very common and similar to Nkrumah, in that they don't only believe in Pan-Africanism, but that when it's ultimately achieved, there will be a socialist state that will keep Africa going. That we're not only shifting to Pan-Africanism, but also to socialism. So they have that ideal here. They also have a very conscious Rastafarian community here. People who they're completely in the vibe. They understand. And so you have these elements, but they've been hidden. Why? Because they were rebellious in the 80s. And ultimately, when they suppressed the youth movement, the young people, it went to the streets. And from the streets, a small group of people ended up in Libya being trained to come back and fight. And those people who came back and fight are the ones who started the war. So the Pan-Afro group, when it got suppressed by the government, a militant group grew out of it that ended up in Libya. After Libya, they went to Burkina Faso, and they was part of Thomas Sankara's bodyguard. When he got assassinated by his friend, they fled to Liberia, and from Liberia, they attacked the country against the one-party state. But people do not understand the role of Pan-Africanism at all within the struggle for liberation here in Sierra Leone. And it's been covered up. If you talk too loud about Pan-Africanism or start moving in a certain kind of way, you're going to stand out. People say, hey, man, that's against the agenda of the party A and the party B. So what we're doing here right now is we've decided to, first of all, we do have African Liberation Day every year now. Every year, at least since 2017. I was a part of a group that formed called the Pan-African Coalition of Sierra Leone, and we still meet monthly. Right now, we're registering a community-based organization in Freetown, and our plan is to unify all of the different Pan-Africanist organizations into a single coalition that can then go throughout the country and build local branches. So that way we can collectivize the Pan-Africanism across the country. Here, in order to have a political party, you have to have offices in certain places of the country, and you have to have certain things that you have to, build up to. So the purpose of building the coalition as a mass organization is so that we can emerge as a popular mass political party when it's time. So there's levels of political power. Maybe we don't pursue the presidency. Maybe we don't pursue the parliament. Maybe we focus on local councils. Maybe we focus on school boards. Maybe we focus on, certain areas where we can play a critical role in certain Pan-African consciousness into the minds of the people who are working on the farms, into the minds of the people who are driving transportation all day. And so people here, what I understand is that when they hear Pan-Africanism, it resonates with them. They prefer it. It's almost like when Malcolm said, if the people only see the dirty glass of water, that's what they're going to drink. But if you give them clean glass and a dirty glass, naturally, an intelligent person is going to take the clean glass. And so Pan-Africanism allows us to provide a clean glass next to what the people are getting. And so because of that, Pan-Africanism has been suppressed here. And so I think that's the same thing throughout the African world. We have to understand this because this is what we're up against as African liberation freedom fighters. And that's of any cut. It doesn't matter what your religion is, what your organizational affiliation is. Like Baba Akili says, this is one movement. The UNIA-ACL is an entity, an institution, a government that was formed to provide a specific service and play a specific role within the African liberation struggle. Everybody got a role to play. And I believe, as a third assistant president general here on the continent, coming out of Freetown, Sierra Leone, that we're currently, as the Rehabilitation Committee 2020, playing a very, very critical role in the forward march towards Pan-Africanism in the country of Sierra Leone and several other countries on the continent. Particularly, we have a young division in formation in Burkina Faso. We have a division also popping in Nigeria. We have a division, about to have our second division in Ghana. We have a division to rebuild in Gambia, but we got forces there. So we're also in Kenya, and we got members over in Tanzania. So the UNIA-ACL RC2020 is active on the African continent. You may not see it all or hear it all, but that's how governments work. You understand? That's how government works. But we're here, and we're moving. So that's what I would say.
Ashe, and in support of that, please understand the definitions are not just words, they're actions, they're action steps. So that when the third assistant president general speaks of how we are working on the continent, understand that's also a reminiscence of how we're working in the U.S. States, United States of Snakes. United Snakes. I get it wrong, but we know who we're talking about. You see, because listen, because I'll just say, how we're dealing with the white man, but for real, the African continent in and of itself, because of the divisions that have taken place over time, the concept of Pan-Africanism, the concept of African unity has been challenged and attempted to be diluted. But those who have stood steadfast with it has moved the needle. And that's what's taking the time. We're moving the needle with the masses. So from generation to generation to generation, we have to teach the same philosophy of African liberation, of African freedom, of a unified Africa, one movement. One Africa. And then when people begin to understand and our youth get the message as that energy is driving us forward, because it is. The youth are saying old ideas are not enough. Freedom for me, it may not be how it is defined for someone 20, but the concept of freedom is the same despite generations.
They both.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Like now, after getting those statements and they're quite representative of where we are in the UNIA-ACL RC2020. Lots of what was said now, there may be questions. So let me
Bob, before you go, I want to just add something to what.
Oh, yes, indeed, my sister.
Okay.
Please do.
Baba Foday, I just wanted to, when you started talking, it reminded me that we also have to give kudos to those who have maintained Pan-Africanism on the continent. We may not have called it that, but that was their actions. It made me think my very first trip to the continent was 1982, when Julius Nyerere, because my school that I had formed was named after him, with their permission, we visited Tanzania. And the community that was there were already a bunch of expats who had come and formed community there. But in addition to that, I was able to see the organization, that ANC, was very active in Tanzania. That's where they wrote the Arusha Declaration. That the President Nyerere had given them, protection for them to be able to come, because, they were outlawed in South Africa, in Tanzania, and he gave them protection to come and live and work in Tanzania They happened to be, they were working on the Arusha Declaration as I was there, drawing it up and writing it up for them to be able to move forward, which eventually led to the political freedom of the country. We just got to work on the economic, the social, and spiritual aspects of freedom in many of our countries that exist, that continue to exist now. But it is a concept that has lived in many forms by our people, is all I want to stress, by our people worldwide.
I say, Mama Tendai, and we have to redefine those boundaries, because that's part of the challenge that we face when we deal with Pan-Africanism, redefining the boundaries of the nation states. See, we're going to be one Africa, we will have a basic language. We will have an economic system that supports each and every state on the continent. We will have a military that protects and defends each and every state on the continent. So our mindset has to move to the concept of one Africa, because in all of our conversations, our history shows how things happened in one place or another. And what we have to do is connect that history, because it is connected. And then when we connect the history, we teach our youth that here is how we are one. And therefore, the energy of the youth changes the conditions that we have to deal with. Because our youth are no longer accepting, if I may be blunt, the bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
They ain't accepting it.
Yeah. Hey, PG, if those of us who are veterans and elders demonstrate unity at this moment,
Right.
young people will fall in line, because we're dealing with a generation that hasn't seen it.
Yes, correct. I stand 100% with you. We are the teaching arm. We are the teaching arm, because we have to raise the stakes. Our young people throughout the continent and throughout the world, in a lot of cases, our conscious young people are raising the stakes. They're saying, I'm tired of this. Enough of this. You talk about African liberation, but you ain't giving me no meal. You ain't giving me no food. You ain't giving me no jobs. You ain't giving me no nothing. So we're going to raise the stakes. We have to show them that we understand, because we experienced it. See, we're not new to this movement. Yeah. We were young people at one time. We were there. But what we have the ability to do, because where we are, is embrace them and move it forward. Kwame Nkrumah in his time embraced the youth and say, Ghana free, but Ghana's freedom ain't freedom without Africa being free.
I said.
The UNIA-ACL 1920 said one Africa.
Yes, sir.
Let's live it.
All right. Now, I have a question, but let me try to see if anybody in the audience or anyone else here on the panel.
I would like to speak.
I know you're chomping on the bits, my brother, but I'm coming. Our first PG is chomping on the bits, PG. I mean, and I empathize with you, my brother. I know you want to get your word in, but let me first check and see if anybody has a question. Nothing has come up. So, my brother, Baba Senghor, you have it.
Yeah, well, it's not that I'm chopping at the bits. It's just the fact that the ancestors are the first line of revolution. And I want to say that because we haven't said that yet. And I really appreciate all that's been said. We won. It's not about me, he or she. It's about we collectivity. And true Blacktricity comes from all of us, not just the UNIA-ACL parent body RC2020, but every revolutionary person is in the movement before we were even born. And I was at ALD and PG. I know it's interesting because Brother Julius, you, me, and all of us were there, but we didn't see each other because we was in the movement then. We weren't even in the UNIA then. But we got grabbed by the ancestral energy of the Garvey movement, each one of us. Julius served in the AAPRP, brother Chief Foday. That's one of his missions why he came to Sierra Leone. So what I'm saying is, before we even knew that we were all working together, we were working together. So that meant the reparations that we look for, which is internal, was already working. And as Brother Tony Browder say, we have to reclaim our consciousness. And our consciousness goes back way before the Urugu even came into existence. And when we, as y'all have all stated so clearly, Mama Tendai, you definitely was right on point. You know, I traveled to Africa. I met brothers and sisters who were Pan-Africanists when I first went to Senegal. When I went to Ghana, I met Pan-Africanists. In fact, I was invited by Pan-Africanists. And Chief Foday, you're so right, and Menkh is so right. Not enough of us recognize the connection of the movement that came before us. And I must mention Haiti. I was in a meeting this morning with Dr. Julius Garvey and Sister Bella of Haiti. And I want to make it real clear. Before the word African liberation, before the word Pan-Africanism came into existence, our ancestors were fighting for freedom. Ever since we were captive, we've been fighting for freedom. Those of us got away are called Maroons. So I want to stress to everybody, the public, and like you say, Baba Mosi chopping at the bits, but the ancestors are chopping at the bits because our ancestors been waiting and watching. Children still crying and dying because we, the people who are here now, are too apathetic to understand the real reason why we came in this world in the first place, and that is to reclaim our humanity. So I'm gonna stop on that point, but I wanted to add something that I felt. I know Chief Foday knows exactly what I'm talking about. I know PG knows what I'm talking about. I know Mama Tendai, and I know everybody on this line know what I'm talking about. This whole thing that's going on with Urugu right now, they're fighting for their survival. Because look, they've done everything to us. We've been licked, kicked, abused, drugged, robbed, killed, taken from our homeland, and we're still here. So that's a testament to the first of humanity, and we will win. So despite all the shortcomings that have been taking place of our people, those of us who are clear must close ranks now, regardless of what you call yourself. As Brother Julius said, we must organize, organize, organize. And as Kwame Ture and Sheikh Anta Diop, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and Malcolm, who are celebrating 100th centenary year now, all of those ancestors who paved the way, Runoko Rashidi, Tony Martin, Charles L. James, they with us. And so what we need to understand is our duty, as the PG said, to make sure it's one movement. And it's our job to pass on what we've learned, the bumps and the lumps we've gone through, so we don't make the same mistakes, pass on the right energy to the youth, because we will free Africa and Africans will be free. I don't have to say anything else tonight because I think enough has been said. I know a lot of questions may come in. Baba Mosi, I love you dearly. You know, I love you dearly, but I got to speak truth to power. The fact of the matter is we're winning. And that's why Urugu is doing all what they're doing. They're 2025. So we need to look at our 2025 because Chief Foday, as he said earlier, they didn't just kill Malcolm's father. They didn't just kill Malcolm. They killed Malcolm's grandson. So that's a testament to us. 3 generations of men who sacrificed their lives for us. And they are in the whirlwind with the right excellent honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So I say, up you mighty race, accomplish what you will. You won't hear much more from me tonight. Oh, I'm going to listen, but I love y'all. And I wanted to make sure that the ancestors energy come in because that's what we are. PG, you know what I'm talking about. We obedient servants to those ancestors who trained us. But it was ancestors who came before them. And like Haiti did, we're going to free Africa and the whole world is going to return back to our traditional greatness. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that, our First Assistant President General. Thank you very much. Like I said, you were chomping at the bits, no matter how you deny it. that stuff had to get out of your head there, So we know you.
The truth.
Oh, greetings, Brother David Horne.
talking about the liberation. Our international organizer just checked in.
Yes, indeed. Our international organizer, Dr. David Horne. Um, we had a pretty good discussion prior to your coming on. You may not have heard any of it. But let me give you a little bit of what I'm saying. We defined what the meaning of liberty is, and liberation, of course, is coming out of that definition. And let me give you the definition because I got this so that you know exactly where I'm coming from. This is from Google. Liberty is defined as the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. And we have from the Cambridge Dictionary, freedom to live as you wish or go where you want. And the question to me was, where are we in Africa as we relate to this definition? After all that we've gone through during colonialism and having obtained political, in quotes, freedom, can anybody in Africa really define themselves as being free? And I will turn to you now to ask, what is your opinion of what I just asked there? Can African people define themselves? And besides that, let me say, we've got political freedom, so to speak. We've got the flags, we've got the liberal economies, and we've got the Euro-centered kind of political aspects of what elections are and democracy. But are we really free?
I know there are questions for Dr. David Horne.
He's got to get his audio going.
So why you do that? There's two things. There's brother Julius, and
Julius has his hand up.
I believe he didn't have his hand up, but when his picture came up, that was just as good as his hand because that meant he had something to say.
Okay, Menkh. Go right ahead, bro. Oh, your audio is off.
And the Menkh is for Nkrumah.
We had liberated zones historically in our Pan-African movement. Guinea was one of the major liberated zones where Nkrumah lived with the PDG of 1947. And then we're not even talking about the RDA, Rassemblement Democratique Africain, which was the second largest African organization in this world outside of the UNIA. And it's out of the study groups from the RDA that Sheikh Anta Diop emerged. And where this whole line of struggle and study and understanding how do we form liberated states called for the 1978 Ideological Conference that was attended by 103 members that was held in Guinea-Conakry to talk about how do we not end up in this same state we were in before. Now, the continuation of that ended up being what Gaddafi was able to do in Libya, where people are able to see that we had a liberated zone, where people were able to go to school, people were able to have income, and this brother even figured out how to bring water to the desert. It's that kind of technology that we're now seeing maybe even out of Zimbabwe right now, where we have a young brother in Zimbabwe that's created a car that works off electrical energy, does not use gas or water. How do we keep that technology alive? How do we use that information, and it is information to this point, because very few people really know about it, so that people understand they can have that freedom of thought, that they can even think about having a car that doesn't run on gas? We have people making gas in Ghana out of plastic. And so now we have the creativity of our youth, seeing what it takes to be a sovereign. But what does it take to build industry, to build government? Is you have to have organization.
Right.
And that's what Nkrumah called for.
That's what Garvey called for too.
That we have to have that organization in order for us to be able to weld power in the direction of liberation in each of these little microstates.
Okay.
Which is why African Liberation Day didn't continue in Africa, and it ended up in the Pan-African Secretariat in Guyana. Because Africans all over the world were aware of Pan-Africanism, becoming aware of it as students. It was a student movement. And so it's, again, this youth that we have to be able to communicate with. It was the same youth that I met with in Pan-Afu. It was the first African Liberation Day that I helped organize in Freetown, that the government cut off the electricity to the microphones and to the speakers. That's the kind of activity you end up engaged in when you're going to speak about the liberation of your people. It was the oppressive forces that came out of Charles Taylor's army that plastered Pan-Afu stickers all over their tanks when they rolled into Freetown in 91 and 92. And they gave a real bad name to Pan-Afu as a result of that happening. Foday, I'm sure you can speak more to that than I can ever witness. I just remember listening on the telephone in the slit to the bombs blasting in Freetown. This is having liberated zones as our objective of liberation, but you have to have a liberated zone in order to operate a liberation movement. So that's why the call for a diaspora as the conditions in order to focus that energy internationally of all African people on the liberation of Africa.
And before David Horne speaks, and I'm sure he's going to, I think we have to redefine what diaspora is and potentially rename it so that we can be more inclusive, because I think that speaks only to people who are not on the continent. I think what I hear you saying and what I've heard elders say prior to my time, even in this role, is that Africa in and of itself has to redefine and redirect its energies so that it incorporates the energy of its youth, and not only incorporate the energy of its youth, understand and explain the negativities that have been utilized. As you pointed out, Pan-Africanism being plastered on the tanks was to give a negative definition to Pan-Africanism. We have to counter that. We have to counter that with a more positive aspect. So one of the challenges that we face is how we begin to communicate to the youth that are active and energetic. And energetic meaning the young people that are taken to the streets on the continent of Africa saying enough. We have to be able to communicate with them how we change the landscape. We have to have that conversation so that when we present that conversation, we're able to answer their questions. And when you can't answer their questions, you have to be willing to say, give me the answer to your question, because we have to incorporate all of that energy.
Yeah, something happened to my sound. I can't hear anybody.
Okay, but we can now hear you, David.
Yeah. But you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can I stay on the phone?
No, you can hear. We hear you, David. You can hang the phone up, David.
So go hang the phone back up.
Yeah, we can hear you. David, we can hear you.
I was going to try to call in.
David, we can hear you.
He can't hear you,
getting nothing out of the earphones.
He can't hear you.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to call him back later.
Yeah. Hey, Baba, I want to also say, exactly what you said, Brother Julius. That's exactly what happened here. And I'm still with the remnants of Pan-Africa. I was able to meet some of them when I first got here. A lot of the elders are gone now. Some of the people that was youth in the early 90s and mid 90s, they are now elders now. And so now they're still around, and we still have Pan-Afro School. It's still there in Central. We still have Brother Raheem Kamara. I don't know if you know Brother Raheem Kamara. So the comrades are still around. But a lot of the brothers that was connected to Pan-Afro, they went out. They're all over the world right now. So when you talk about the diaspora playing a role in boosting up Pan-Africanism on the continent, that's another dynamic to think about, because within the struggles in Liberia and Sierra Leone in the 80s and 90s were Pan-Africanists. Pan-Africanists participated. Pan-Africanists were in the midst. They were there. And they get wiped completely out of the whole story. And when I came here, I found the remnants of that and was like, man, they understand. Why don't we know that Pan-Africanism was a driving force, not only in the struggle, but also in the struggle for peace here? That some of the people who played the main role in servicing the displaced communities, and trying to restore order to chaos, was the Pan-Africanist brothers and sisters here. But they're written completely out of the history. So yeah, he's correct. The propaganda against Pan-Africanism in Liberia and Sierra Leone has been serious. And if you know about the history of both countries, you know why. Yeah. Specifically connected to the African diaspora.
David can speak now. He's listening on my phone, but he can't hear us, but he can speak. David, you can go ahead and speak.
Hello, everybody. I apologize for my delay. The family here took my time and said they didn't care what else I had to do. Anyway, one of the things that we are working on, besides an educational program, a baccalaureate and master's degree curriculum for the Marcus Garvey University. Besides doing that, we are talking about changing the vocabulary. We need to change the terms in which we are discussing Pan-Africanism, partially because of the new people like President Traore, and also because of the older people who've gotten used to it and they are negotiating it away. They are saying that, for example, in Rwanda, the president is saying he is absolutely a Pan-Africanist, and he does not understand why other people don't understand what he's doing in terms of helping to maintain the killing and the disorder that is going on in the part of East Africa. We have to change the terminology and the way that we are approaching this building. Marcus Garvey as the architect, the visionary of how we need to move forward. Let me give you a quick example. There is no credible scientific evidence now against the out of Africa theory. The whole idea that all mankind came out of Africa. Given that scientific formulation right now, since all mankind, all 7 billion folk came out of Africa, damn it, they are African descendants. We are not, we are African ascendants. We have to stop dealing with them defining our terminology. We have to define our own. We have to look at ourselves not as members of an African diaspora meaning you left on your own, meaning that you migrated away from your homeland. We didn't migrate away, we were stolen away, we were traded away. We have to change the terminology upon which we are laying out a plan to build Pan-Africanism. Marcus Garvey was an architect envisioning how the building was supposed to look. We have to finish that creativity. We have to envision Pan-Africanism. That's all for now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, my brother. All right. We've got some words, some details of where UNIA-ACL RC2020 is dealing with how we're going to we need to educate our people. But I've got a question dealing with, the consciousness of our people on the whole, not only on the continent, but everywhere else, when it comes to this terminology, democracy. And we see the confusion that's going on in the world today because it's the Euro-centered world has the monopoly of sharing information. And they've been putting out a lot of misinformation, disinformation towards the people, the non-Europeans. And so most people think that when democracy, the word democracy is used, it's used to represent what freedom really is and how a country should be governed. So when we see certain things happening in Africa, as you was being mentioned earlier by Chief Foday and Baba Menkh, our people in Africa are understanding what governance is in a confused way, aren't they? Isn't that why some people now, and especially the young people, are really rebelling? Because their minds are confused when it comes to, let's say, to governance.
They have not been properly educated.
Yeah, well,
I would say that that's a worldwide situation because, as I put in here today, the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Ras Baraka, was arrested by ICE. So what?
ICE?
Yes, ICE arrested him at a ICE detention center in the public space, along with there were Congress people who were with him. ICE invited him in. He went in. He came back out because they were in the public space protesting, as is supposed to be a democratic right. And ICE came out into that area and arrested him. Now, why did they arrest him without arresting the other congresspersons who surrounded him and tried to keep ICE from taking him? Okay. So when you are talking about it, what David is saying in terms of redefinition, that is what we have to look at. When we look at what you were saying, Baba Mosi, in terms of language and misinformation, think about what the Dark Ages were. It was the colonization of information, of education, of language, and of thought. So we're dealing with a group who is trying to reinstitute all of those things. But the reality is, as David was saying, we have to bring our Pan-Africanism into a new context because of the development of technology.
Right.
We also need to understand that the arrest of the mayor was to say to those other political leaders, it can happen to you.
Not just that. Why would they drop Baraka? I'm thinking they did it to send a message to us.
That's right.
Okay, they
starts with them and comes to us.
An African name, a non-Christian name, when the effort here is Christian nationalism.
Right.
Okay.
We have a convicted criminal who is running a criminal enterprise.
Yes.
He is violating the law. The courts have already told him what to do. He has not followed one of those court orders. He's decided he doesn't need to do that, and he has put in place people who are supposedly the keepers of the law. They are actually the crooks.
Exactly.
They have turned this particular democracy on its head. This is not African democracy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the language, you see. That's democracy. And by redefining and bringing in new definitions, we create what it is that we are trying to develop.
You're right. I totally agree.
But this was the great value of liberated zones.
Yeah.
Liberated zones, you move from resistance to offense. You move from what it takes to actually build a government. You talk about how the organization of work and responsibilities is shared among the people. Mm-hmm. And people take that responsibility upon themselves. Those are where the real ideals of democracy come into practice. Not because it's the law, but because you're a participant.
But isn't this all?
What you said is important. And that is you are moving from resistance to offense, which is what I'm constantly saying. They're going to do what they're going to do over there. We're aware of it, but we must be in the process of building what it is that we want.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that the principle of participatory democracy is something that you find in African communal systems anyway. I've been in these villages. I've seen where everybody comes out and have one big conversation. And if you got something to say, you get an opportunity to say it. And then it goes through their leadership process, and they have what they call here one word. One word means after they go through that process, whatever the chief says is what everyone has said. So it's a way to develop democracy locally among themselves. And I've lived in it. I've seen it work. The people here have a high level of political education because they participate in their own decision-making locally a lot more than what we do out there. So they have a different level of freedom than what we even talking about. It's almost like we have sympathy on Africa, but we don't appreciate Africa's level of freedom. There's a freedom here you can't experience nowhere else in the world. And that's why I ain't going nowhere.
Now, brother, you teaching now. You teaching now.
Yes.
And every African society has a similar structure.
That's absolutely. Right. And so, just to give you an example, right? The structure of the Manding people. The Manding people are a very, very large ethnic group. They have about 100 different ethnic groups within. Every ethnic group speaks a different dialect. For instance, the Bambara are Manding. The Mandinko people, they're Manding. The Korenko here, the Mende people, they're all Manding. They speak that language. They have the same basic social system, the same basic structure. This structure has been in place for thousands of years and is based on 3 levels. The first level is the Lu, L-U. It's the extended family. That's your first level of identity, no matter who you are born in Africa. It's the Lu. Who's your extended family? That's when somebody knows you. And then you have what you call the Dugu. The Dugu is when you have a group of extended families that settle together and live among each other. When they come together, their form of government is called the Dugu, which is also interpreted as the village. After the village now, you have what they call the Kafu. And on top of the Kafu is a Kafu Tigi. On top of the Dugu is the Dugu Tigi. These are the head people that are chosen by the people to have the one word when it's time to be spoken. And so the Kafu is a collective of Dugus. So whenever you have a group of villages that's based on a group of extended families, and they're all working together under one structure, it's called a Kafu. And so Kafu to Kafu, you end up with a kingdom. Kingdom to kingdom, you end up with an empire. Our people wasn't building nation states.
That's
right. They were building family kingdoms. So this is what I'm saying, is that we keep trying to define our liberation struggle based on what they put us in.
Yeah.
Not what we came from.
That's
Chief,
what I mean about changing
you've
the
answered
terms of
you
reference.
answered my question, Chief. That's where I was trying to go with you, in the sense of, how African people, with all these definitions of democracy and all that, and the Euro-centered kind of democracy that was placed in
There
our
ain't no,
minds
there
during
ain't
the
no such
colonial
thing as
period.
Eurocentric democracy. It's demonocracy.
Well,
They don't have no democracy.
whatever we
They
want
don't
to do,
have no democracy.
we're in confusion with all this
Yeah,
stuff.
but that's why we need to redefine. Yoruba
Yeah,
don't have no democracy.
Hey,
I
It's
don't doubt that.
demonocracy.
hey,
Now,
Baba
this is
Mosi.
what Kwame Nkrumah called conscientism when he was trying to get the people in Ghana to understand some of the things that we need to get back to when it comes to African governance.
Absolutely. Hey,
Well, we already have it. I'm saying, Baba, they even talk about, when they talk about traditional political systems, they don't define them, but they're all defined exactly by the way Chief explained it, regardless of country.
And Sheikh Anta Diop laid it out that we need federation. We need our own federations.
family kingdom.
Yes,
Family
which
kingdom.
takes us to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a voice about to speak before I said
It
was her myself.
But Harry, you wanted to say something, right?
Yeah,
You got
I
Brother
heard
Congo as well, Baba Mosi, afterwards.
Who?
You got
Brother
Brother Congo as well afterwards.
Congo?
Right.
Oh, okay.
But one of the things you have to realize is that all this is information warfare on a spiritual and energetic level, and that if they control the education narrative, they control the propagation of the information that's being propagated, and it takes on its own life form. So what is missing is that we have to amplify how we propagate our own information, our own narrative, the grammar and the mathematics of it, because there is a battle in the physical space. And that we have to, and that's why you think about in this information age, talk about Nkrumah's information warfare. You really have to study all of the works that were written in the early 1900s through the 1970s. They gave us the algorithms. We just had to put it together in the education format so that the youth can be more attuned to the definitions and how to create their own reality based upon the leadership algorithms and as well as the development algorithms that was written by ancestors who are no longer here.
And understanding that the spirituality that you're talking about was already defined, all of those algorithms were already put together by the spiritual divination systems that exist among our people.
Exactly.
Because the divining system is a binary system, which is the basis for the computer. And additionally, technology is another name for Ogun.
Brother Congo.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. We're right now the African population on the continent. Half of them are under 30 years old. It's a very young dynamic. I don't like seeing that they are going to the Mediterranean Sea and trying to cross over into Europe because we have not developed, or they don't have a way of developing the skills to survive in Africa. And that's very sad. I find we have to take complete control of our education because all of them are still getting miseducation by a European style type of education. Not everybody, but that's one thing that we have to really work on. Okay, but there are quite a few things that we have to do. We also have to worry about food. Nigeria have 200 million people, and half of them are under 30, and then we're going to have babies, so that's going to double within 20 years. We don't have. They're not right now. Right now, they're not producing enough food,
and a 34% inflation rate.
Yeah, they're not producing enough food to feed that population that's going to come. Population going to double in the next 20 years, and so therefore we have to work on our agriculture, but don't cut down our forests because we need that forest. That lady that got a Nobel Peace Prize from Kenya about planting trees is definite. Our seas are being invaded by everybody. We should have a 200-mile zone like quite a few places have of economic thing because they're killing all our fishes or they're overfishing what we have. Those things have to be taken care of. Okay, we don't make any guns, but the thing is, guns are all over our neighborhood in this country and every country, and also in Africa. And there's no reason why there's, a big civil war going on in Sudan and quite a few different places that make me sad. And we have to and then we also have to talk about Africa. There's no reason why quite a few of the African countries have relationship or have things that the U.S. can fly in or the French can fly in and keep on devastating the place. Those things we have to work on. And it's hard work, but that's what we have to do it. But the main thing we have to do is population and feeding our people. And then, then we have to take care of our health of our people by, producing more nurses and doctors and engineers. That's all I have to say.
Baba Mosey?
Yes, sir.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
As we speak of African liberation, the cornerstone of this conversation, all of the statements are not only relevant, but true to the point. But we have to make sure we stay focused on defining African liberation and stay focused on what steps we can take in order to ensure the continuation of the movement for African liberation. We, in this conversation, as we bring up multitudes of challenges, must not lose sight of what our ancestors said to us over 100 years ago. Africa for the African, those at home and those abroad. All of the dynamics that we have mentioned and all of the activities that we have talked about that have happened historically and that are taking place now, even with our youth, fall back to that very same conscious statement. Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Now, Garvey made a point to say everybody don't have to go back to Africa, because if you ain't doing shit where you are, we don't need you to come home and not do shit. Excuse my vernacular, and I apologize for my English, and it is my English. But I need us to understand that as we look at these challenges, it is our responsibility to see it from those eyes that are younger than ours and be able to add to that view what we believe will move it to the completion of the task. What is the task? A liberated Africa. A unified Africa. In the 1920s, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey worked to build a unified Africa. Before Marcus Messiah Garvey, men and women worked to build a unified African consciousness. Garvey only took it to the land base because he said, where is that continent going to exist? And he said, it exists on the continent from which we come. Let us not lose focus. Let us understand there are multitudes of challenges, yes. And we have the ability to address them, yes. We have the history that teaches us the pitfalls, yes. So let us not fall into the pit. Let us continuously move forward and stay steadfast in our commitment to African Liberation Day and a liberated Africa. But a liberated Africa is a unified Africa. This is not an Africa that exists for 54 nations. It's an Africa that exists with 54 states. One unified nation, one unified economy, one unified military, one unified educational system, whatever variations that take place. The reason we have moved steadfast in establishing the next level for our own institution here is because we recognize it becomes essential that we certify people to teach Garvey, that we teach it. The Constitution of the UNIA says you have to have the course in order to obtain leadership. It says it. We are implementing it. We're making it a reality. And therefore, we're taking it further to make sure that others give the same opportunity. People who hear us understand we're not in confusion. Our ideas do not separate us. We're not even in the argument. Every statement that is made here is a statement of complementary to the other. It's a unified statement, even if it's different views on a different plane. It is one Africa that we work for. It is one unified African nation that we work for. It is one liberated African people. It is one way of seeing the world from an African perspective with different views on different topics. I don't want the community that hears this and sees this to think that there's people all over the place. We're not all over the place. We are dealing with a multitude of challenges and a multitude of challenges time in America and the rest of the world. Africa is not independent. We are not free. However, we are working for freedom, and we have defined the role as my first assistant president general and my brother, more so than the title, my brother and my friend. It is Blacktricity. It is the blackness reviving and reverberating in the world that says enough. I demand my freedom. I demand my ability to control my destiny. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, PG. And, I wanted to get to Boubacar because what we were discussing was a lot of what's happening in the, I guess, the Anglo speaking or Anglophone parts of Africa. I wanted to get a word from him as to how he sees things happening in the French Africa. But anyway, I think he lost power. There he is. It's very early in the morning there too. Anyway, PG, I think you've said the last word. And that sums it up pretty clearly as to what the UNIA is looking forward to be doing, unifying the people and creating one Africa. And that's what I think we can close on. We can leave that thought with the rest of the world. The UNIA-ACL RC2020 is looking forward to one Africa. We're working towards it. We're building towards it. And there is no definition that can come in between one Africa. It's not, it's just one Africa. So people, let's close with our motto, with the addition of one Africa. I thank you all for having been with us this evening and in this lively discussion. And I hope it opens the mind of many people who will be watching this on, or who have watched this on Facebook, and who will be watching it later on YouTube, and who will, wherever you can find this, if it's shared, share it with your folks, because we need you to understand UNIA is around and it's about to do some serious work coming this next phase.
Yes,
because and I say it's next phase because let's look at what's happening in Europe and all the things. They all, like you said, Baba Senghor and PG, you know, they're fighting for survival. And their survival comes with owning Africa. And we can't have that. So Africans, be aware, be conscious, take pride in self, take up the tools to free Africa. I say one God,
one God,
one aim,
one aim,
one destiny,
one destiny,
one destiny,
and one Africa.
one
One
Africa.
Africa.
One Africa.
Peace and love. Peace and
one
love.
Africa.
One Africa. Yes, indeed.
One Africa.
One Africa with two fists.
Hey, and a hook shot too, baby.
All right. Brother Heru,
Take
you
care.
can take us out, my brother.